All right, guys, we are back with the Kevin and Fred show, and I'm excited about today's episode and guest, Jess Lenouvel. Did I say that right, Jess? Let's start
You
there.
you got it right.
Awesome. All right. I'm already feeling good about myself. This interview is going to be amazing. Mostly because you are here and I'm super excited to have this conversation. You and I were chatting a little bit off screen, I guess, pre
Yeah.
me hitting record about in fact, I kind of got to know your story a little bit and was really excited when I got the opportunity to book this time for us to do this podcast. So super excited for this today.
Thank you so much for having me. Same thing. Like when the opportunity showed up, I was like, "Oh yeah, Kevin, totally want to talk to him."
Awesome. Well, let's dive into it. Just like there's a few different places I want to take this conversation, but for the listener who maybe doesn't know you, give us
Mhm.
a little bit of backstory. Let's start. How long have you been in real estate? Kind of how'd you get started, and then we'll start to dive in from there.
Yeah, so I am 37. I got into real estate when I was 21. Um
Wow. When you were 20, first of all, let me just stop there. Most of us are, I mean, I was still technically in my 20s, but most of us, let's face it, in real estate, it's like a second, third, fourth
yeah,
career for a lot
yeah.
of us. So you started real early.
I started really early and it wasn't super intentional. It's not like I grew up thinking, "Oh, I'm going to be in real estate one day,"
Okay.
which I don't think a lot of us do. But my mom has been a realtor for 35 years.
Got it.
And so I kind of grew up in the industry. I started doing her paperwork at around 13. So it was just one of those situations where I came out of school, not really sure what I wanted to do with my life. I didn't really have a lot of direction. And I don't think anybody in my family really thought I was very entrepreneurial. Like that wasn't like, they weren't like, "Oh, she's going to do great things," or anything like that. We have like kind of like a family joke that they thought, "Oh, she's going to have to marry well." Right. So my mom just sort of said, "Why don't you get your license? See if you like it. I think you'd be good at it." So I did, which I think is why a lot of people get into real estate. They're like, "Oh, someone said that they thought I'd be good at it." So, and I hadn't thought about it before.
So true.
Yeah. So that's sort of what happened. I got my license. I started in the business and I realized very quickly that I couldn't rely on my sphere because my sphere was my mom's sphere.
Ooh, good point.
Yeah. So it was one of those situations where were they going to choose me, 21, brand new license, or were they going to choose my mom, who was like obviously a more mature adult than I was at 21, and she'd been in the business at that point for 20 years.
I was gonna say an experienced agent. So let me ask you this: so you didn't go to work for were you on her team? You didn't go to work for her doing that, or did you spend
We
any
tried
time?
working together for a very short period of time. My mom is my best friend. We did not work well together.
I
So it
love
was
it. You
just one of
recognize that.
yeah, and I work with my husband now and have for 10 years, but it's just one of those situations where it was way better for our relationship to be working separately.
That makes a lot of sense. I could see that. Okay, so you're 21, you're going for it. Obviously, your sphere, the people you know that probably would work with you, they're also 21, maybe a little bit
Yeah,
younger, maybe a little bit older, probably
not buying real
not a
estate
ton in
early
the real
yet.
estate market, right? So,
Yeah.
okay, so how did you make it work? Like what happened?
Yeah, so there was this brand new thing called Facebook.
All right.
And nobody really knew how to use it properly, and I didn't even really know how to use it properly, but, I identify as being pretty introverted. I'm definitely not, like, life of the party. I'm not the person who's gonna, like, pick up a client in the grocery store. My husband's very outgoing, and I'm always like, "Okay, we're gonna go into the grocery store, we're gonna get 3 things, you're not gonna talk to anyone, and we're gonna leave." Like, that's the conversations that we have before we go into stores, because he will make conversation with anyone. That's not who I am. So it was one of those things where, I started at Keller Williams and, back then they were very, very heavy cold calling, door knocking, flyers, things like that. I tried it a couple times and just thought, if this is how I have to build my business, like it's not for me.
Right.
So, I started what I call it now, like prospecting from my PJs. I sat on my couch and went on Facebook and started building relationships and giving value. So, back then there was like a classified section. There wasn't marketplace or anything like this. And honestly, like this strategy would never work today, but we're talking like, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
16 years ago. And so what I did was I just started, people who were like in search of housing or looking for a rental or like things like that. I started just giving them value, giving them advice, talking to them, working numbers for them, things like that. A lot of them, sometimes they ended up renting with me. Sometimes they ended up buying because they didn't realize that they could buy. So that's really how I initially built like the baseline of my business. And then all of those people who did all of those lease deals, even with me when I was in my like early 20s, they all stayed with me over time and ended up buying. So that was more manual and it was more like organic.
Yeah.
And then over time, it became paid traffic, it became audience building, it became all of the things that it kind of is today.
Yeah, kind of different. Well, what I love though, what I heard was like it's like you said it, like you couldn't go out and do those exact things today, but you could from a standpoint of you could take the same thought process and the principles for what you did. You would have to do something different for sure, but it would be based on the same principles and foundation, right?
Oh,
Um,
100%.
what I heard was, to coin a term of Gary V's jab, 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 right hook, right? Give the value, give the value, give the value, create the relationships, and then of course they're going to work with you, right? Of course, they're going to do that, and the way you happen to do that then obviously would be different than the way you would do it if you were starting here in 2021. But the
Mhm.
the principles wouldn't be any different.
No, the principles aren't different, and a lot of what we teach now is actually very similar, right?
Yeah,
It's give, and then ask, serve before you sell. We use a lot more psychology, and
yep,
it's a lot more intentional than I was doing when I was 21. But there's a lot of the same principles of, okay, well, it didn't feel good, and I didn't even know that I was really onto something at that point,
yeah,
right? Like I knew that it didn't feel good to cold message someone and ask for something, and
yeah.
I knew that like the pitch wasn't, it needed to be massaged.
That's funny. I had a very similar experience. I had so I'll skip part of it here, but like as our business transitioned from short sales, where it was just about knowing more than basically everyone else about this thing and having specialized knowledge, it became I had to get good at sales and like really lean into those relationships which I had built. But I could not call. Like, I just could never call and say, "Hey, Jess, it's Kevin. This is a business call. Who do you know that's looking to buy or sell real estate in the next 30 days?" I could never do that. For
No,
me, I that makes me squirm. I needed a reason to call you and say, "Hey, Jess, how's it going? Can I do something for you?" Or, "Hey, I got this thing over here. Can I give it to you?" Type of deal. And it sounds to me like you had a similar thought process and experience
100%. I think that there's an element of reciprocity that's just humanly built into all of us.
for sure.
And, you know, I get that there's like a means to an end, but I also think that, I mean, I didn't want to portray myself that way. I didn't
Yeah.
want to be that person who people were like, oh, she's calling. Or like, I didn't want to be the agent who, like, you meet someone in a dinner party and you shake their hand and there's a card in their hand. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like all of those like things that, people think, oh my God, she's an agent, I'm gonna like go
Gotta
over
go
here,
away.
like
Yeah.
away from her, right? I really wanted to be a resource, and I really think that the best clients and the most long-term clients and are the people that you build that relationship and that influence with. And
Totally.
so really, like, that's what I started doing right from the beginning, and now there's like a system and a process around it and things like that. But back then it was just, I was literally following my gut in terms of if I was on the other end of this, how would I want this done?
Yeah, I love that. It's so funny how you can do that. You can take some now at some point. So did you have a coach or something? At what point did you realize like, okay, I'm doing something here and there's actually a system in this? Was there a turning point? Was there a conversation? How did you figure that out?
So I didn't actually figure that out until I started this business,
Really?
which is very interesting. We built all these systems out, but I didn't ever sit down and like formulate it into a methodology until I think I was forced to.
That's good. I mean, that's
Right?
honest. I love the honest answer there. Like,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
you're
it
forced
was
to
like
like actually go internal and go, wait, what am I doing? Like,
what
what is
am I
actually
doing and why
making
does
it
this work
work?
so well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what did you learn from that? Like when you during that process of going, because I'm assuming that comes from the need or the want, the desire to share that with others,
Mm,
because so many people in our industry struggle
yeah.
to make it work. It's like, what was it about that process, or what did you rather, what did you learn about yourself and in your business in that process of like starting to pull that stuff out of you?
Well, I think that when you're going through any process like that, there's an element of imposter syndrome that comes up,
Yeah.
right? Like, okay, yes, I've done this for myself, but who am I to, say that I can do this for other people? And it takes some time, and honestly, it takes success stories in order to get to a point where you're like, oh, I do this and I do this well.
Yeah.
But even going through that process, it was I did a lot of research on psychology. I did a lot of research on, things that were working in other industries. Because I think that in real estate specifically, we tend to be 5 years behind,
If not more. Yeah.
if not more, right?
Yeah.
And so what I really started doing, and I did this when I was selling real estate. It wasn't a situation where I was like, okay, what are other agents doing? Which I think too many agents do.
Yep.
I actually, what the reason why we were successful, we went at one point in when I was selling real estate, we went from essentially 0 to 7 figures in 6 months. And people think like that's outrageous, but it's actually not, because it was really systematized
Yep.
and we knew what the scale needed to look like. We knew the numbers as we scaled, and I wasn't doing the same old stuff that every other agent was doing. We went out into other industries and studied their marketing, and essentially funnel hacked these other industries, these other service-based industries, and what was working, and then brought it back and started testing it in real estate.
That's great. I love that. It's because, um, first of all, business principles are business principles, and generating leads is generating leads, no matter what the industry is. So you realize that, like, hey, I don't have to just do it the way the other people in my office are doing it. And the other thing I want to address, like you just said, someone might hear that and go, "Oh, wait, you went, $1 million in GCI and call it 6 months or whatever." The reality is that's very doable.
Mhm.
The thing is, once you know what to do, it's then just about spending an inordinate amount of time doing that thing
Just
that moves
builds
that
it.
needle. Yes, just
Yeah.
it moves that needle. And then as you're growing the business, if you want to scale it, then it's like, okay, well, I've done that so much. Now it's just okay, I need leverage, whether that's systems or people or both, to
Mhm.
make it go bigger.
Yeah.
And it really is that easy about
Well,
just applying that.
and when I did it the first time, I was alone. So you can imagine at the end of that 6 months how burnt out I was.
Oh yeah.
And it was just my husband and I, and we weren't even married. I don't even think we were married at the time. And it was really just a situation of like my phone would ring and I would cry because I just got to a point where it was too much. And that's really where like the scale and the leverage and the team started coming in, because I realized that because we grew so quickly
Yeah.
that all the other pieces weren't really properly in place yet.
So what if you could like think back to yourself then as you're growing that business,
Mhm.
or like the early stages of it, like what are some pieces of advice that you wish you would have had then early on as you went, okay, I'm doing something that works now. What,
Mhm.
like, if you go back and give yourself some advice, because there's someone listening to this right now that they're in a similar position of like, they feel like they're doing the right things, but they're not totally sure, and they're
Mhm.
not maybe not real sure what their next step should be.
So I think that, one of my biggest regrets is that I hired a coach too late, or I
Mm.
got help too late. I didn't, I should have earlier on found someone who could help me collapse time.
Yeah.
And I wasted time and I wasted money on things that someone else had already figured out.
It, it's so funny how so many of us have to learn things the hard way.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's definitely something that I would do differently. But I think one of the key things that I still talk about and I still teach is you have to have a certain level of fluency of something in your business. You have to understand how it works before you can bring someone in
Yeah.
to take it over for you. And I think there's a lot of shortcutting that people in this industry try to do because they don't want to learn it. And I think that if you think about what, you know, a CEO of a $1 billion company, at some point they've done pretty much every job.
Yeah. I mean,
And
they have, like, you've got to work your way up. It's so funny you say that, like the shortcutting thing. I think so many of us, especially in our industry, like type A driven and or visionary. And it's like, well, I can see where I want to go. I just want to go there faster. So is there a shortcut to get me there rather
Mm,
than actually going through the steps? Like the reality is like sometimes you just got to take one step and then take the
yeah.
next and then take the next, right?
And I think there's an element of falling in love with the journey and the game
For sure.
that you have to like if you're only in it for the success, you're going to hate the process. And, being in business period, doesn't matter what business you're in, you are putting a puzzle together and it's problem solving. That's
Yep.
really all you do all day long is you problem solve. You have to love to problem solve, and you have to get to a point, and I say this all the time, you got to fail faster.
Yeah.
Stop the perfectionism. Like I fail every day at something. And the key, we test things in our marketing. We have test campaigns running running that, like, we're like, we don't know if this is going to work, but if it doesn't work, fantastic. We have that feedback and it's no longer an unknown,
Right.
and we can then move on to the next thing. And I think that there's an element of being a scientist that you have to be willing to do within your business. And yes, there are proven immutable principles of business that you want to follow and you want to learn, but there's also an element of like, have some fun with it.
Yeah. Well, and I always say it like this too, like you've got to figure out like what's the best model for you, or I call it like
Yeah.
what's the relationship you want to have with your business. And
Mm-hmm.
then you've got to test those things that will allow you to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, there are some foundational principles and some immutable laws of business that you're not gonna like you can't shortcut around. You
You're
just
not
can't
going to
do it.
crack those. No.
Yeah, like that's like part of it is like gravity is actually like gravity. Like we're not beating that
Yeah.
one anytime soon, right?
Yeah.
And so we're gonna have to follow those. But there is so much more that is movable. And if we take the time to figure out what suits us best for whatever our goals are, we're gonna be so much better off. Not only are we gonna be better off for it, the people around us, our clients, our spouse, our relationships are gonna be better off because we're gonna be better off.
And we're going to be happier. And
Yeah.
we have people who are like, I want to get out of production. We build a business that's of someone who wants to get out of production very differently from someone who wants to be like the name, the brand, the face,
Yes.
like people want different things. And so one of the first things that we do in our higher level programs is we actually go 10 years, 5 years, 3 years, 1 year. Right. And we break you down from where do you want to be 10 years from now? Like, what does your life look like? What does your day to day look like? Because so often what happens is we have people who come to us and they're thinking, how did I get here? I've been
Yeah.
in real estate for 10 years.
Yep.
I thought I was doing everything right. How did I get here? I have no freedom. I got into this business for unlimited income, freedom, and to help people. I'm not doing any of these things. I'm completely a slave to my business. My husband's gonna leave me. Like I
Yeah.
my kids, I never get to see my kids. All of these things, and it's just because that intentionality wasn't there from day one of reminding yourself, okay, it's not just about the next deal. It's about, what are you building? What are you building towards? What are your days going to look like? I have a coach that I've worked with for a couple of years, and one of our success metrics is how many naps can Jess take a week? And
Love
it's
it.
and he'll, like, we joke around about it, but to a certain degree, there are things, and he'll go into my calendar and he'll say, you don't do that.
I love it.
And I'm like, yeah. And we're all guilty of that, right? We're all guilty
Every
of
one of
like,
us, yes.
it's ego.
Yep.
It's 100% ego of I don't have anything to do. But the truth is my team's got it.
Yeah, it is. It's so funny. I was reading text. I had a little mastermind group last week with some people in my world, and one of my buddies, Andrew in Utah, shared a thought that I'm pretty sure he said it came from James Clear,
Hmm.
the author of Atomic Habits,
Hmm.
which was this question is, if I keep doing what I'm about to do today for the next 5 years, will I end up with more of what I want or less of what I want? And and by the way, like I don't care who you are, at what level of success you are or aren't, like we all do those things that if we just kept doing that like we're doing it today, we're just gonna get us further from where we're at. And
Yeah.
so I think that is so important. I love that you've got your coach actually has the ability to look in your calendar and check you on that because it's so valuable, no
A-
matter who
And
you are or what you do.
and honestly, like I have two coaches who have worked with me for years who can call me out on my crap.
Love it.
And I think that, there's an element of growth that everyone has to constantly be aiming for,
Yeah.
right? And it, a lot of the work that I do with my coaches now is not necessarily business work. It's me work. It's how do we then get you to that next level of you so that you will of course elevate everything else in your business. Every part of your life will get better if you grow. And I think a lot of the things that people hit up against, we can give someone all the strategies, all the tactics, all the principles, all the tools, but it doesn't mean that they're going to be successful because they have to actually do the thing.
Yeah, it's like I love that. So one of my very first mentors, he passed away a number of years ago. His first book that he wrote was a book called "If How Tos Were Enough, We Would All Be Skinny, Rich, and Happy." And because it's
I
like,
love that.
because the tools are, it's not the tools. It's not that we all have
No,
access to tools, especially now. Things are so available.
you
You
have
know,
access to everything.
yeah, you can learn everything on YouTube that you ever want to know
Yep.
about
Yep.
any subject ever,
Hmm.
and or podcasts or
Hmm.
whatever,
Hmm.
and you could become an expert, a subject matter expert. And so the how to and the tool it's just not enough. Like it never has been enough, and it never will be enough. Because if it was, as Mr. Clemmer would always say, we'd all be skinny, rich, and happy. And
Yeah.
so it's never just about the how to's or the tools. So I love that you mentioned that. So tell me a little bit about like what you're doing now. Like how do you spend your time? Like you mentioned like some higher level courses that you have. Tell me
Mhm.
about what's like the focus of your what I'm going to call your working time these days.
Yeah, so we have in like kind of like the listings lab umbrella, we have three different programs. So we have the accelerated agent, which is for newer agents or agents who are very new to social media or are below six figures.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, then we have the listings lab, which is essentially the marketing foundations and the marketing build out to get you from six to seven figures.
Okay.
And then we have the seven figure agent. So the seven figure agent program it's essentially like us and our team, like kind of like fingers in your business a lot more. And it's how to scale, how to build a team, leverage, automation, marketing, all of the things to get you to a point where you can do seven figures, multiple seven figures, and work half the time that you worked when you were making six figures. So it's kind of like we follow the principle, like the Tim Ferriss principle of eliminate, automate, outsource.
Love it.
Right. I think so many people in the real estate space, they outsource first, and it's the most expensive and the least efficient way of doing things. So we always do, we do full business audits when someone first comes into that program. And so a lot of my time now is, I'm the dancing bear of our business,
Of course.
right?
Somebody has to
So
do it.
someone's got to do it. So I'm doing a lot of nurturing, I'm creating a lot of content, I'm doing trainings, I'm taking trainings, so that the truth of everything is every single person on my team is constantly learning, because if they're not, then we're not getting better and our programs aren't getting better.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm doing trainings. I have a head integrator. She essentially is the CEO of my business. She runs everything, like the entire back end of my business. She's my
o-
kind of like my half CEO, half COO.
Okay. Got it.
Her name's Ashley. She runs the whole back end of my business. She keeps me super organized. I'm a 10 quick start, if you know what Colby looks like.
Yep.
I'm a 10 quick start, and I'm a 3 or a 2 everything else. So I am pure visionary. And so my business is built around that.
That's awesome. I
It's
love
built
that.
it's built around the fact that like I get to have my head in the clouds, and I get to move the business, think about where I want the industry to be, like be that person. And I can dream while my team does a lot of the like detail work.
I love that. I mean, because what I love is you're doing in your own business what you're suggesting, like you're taking your own medicine, what you're suggesting that your clients take, and that and what they do. And so to me, it's, I mean, it's important, right? I can't stand people that teach stuff that don't do what they're teaching, right? You've got to be able to, my opinion, you've got to be able to walk the walk. Otherwise, why would anybody listen to you and take your advice?
Yeah, and I was thinking about this the other day. When I first started this business, one of the that was like at the forefront of my mind. And I remember thinking, like, first month that we launched the listings lab, this was years and years ago. I was living in California, and there was this moment where I was like, how can I tell agents that I can get them to seven figures if I'm not at seven figures in this business, even though I had a multiple seven-figure real estate business? And I think that was actually in a disservice to me, because I pushed so hard that our first month was a seven-figure run rate, because I was like, I have to be in alignment.
Even if it makes me out of alignment everywhere
Even though
else.
even if it makes me burnt out, and I'm out of alignment on
Yeah,
that side of it, right? So I think that there's growth, and exponential growth is 100% possible in
totally.
at any time in your business.
Yep.
But I think a lot of the time it's about distilling down and focusing on the right things instead of trying to focus on everything.
Yeah, totally agree.
And we all have like, all agents have shiny object syndrome.
Yeah.
We all have it.
Some of us are just aware of it. Some of us aren't.
Yeah.
You know, I always laugh. I laugh at myself. I know I do. But when I go, back in the old days when we could go to big events, I would always avoid. I have to avoid the vendor hall. I can't do it because like you'll just get one deal. Like, oh, look over there. Like
Oh, I buy
I'll just
everything.
buy shit, and I'm like,
No, I buy everything.
I can't. Like I'm too shiny object. I've
Yeah.
got to like know that about myself, and that's why
Hmm.
that's why I learned to live by a calendar, so that way
Yep.
like it just I've learned I've got to set myself up to know that I'm not good enough to beat my shiny object syndrome by myself, so I have to make rules around it so that way I can't
Oh,
cheat it.
absolutely. And we've had like, I'll give you an example. So we have a guy who is in our seven-figure agent program. He came in about a year ago, April 1st of last year, and he was doing all the things, like all the things,
Everything.
everything,
One of
and but
everything.
a little bit of everything, and
Yeah.
was like absolutely drowning. And we really got super clear on what was going to move the needle. And I think he, what did he tell me the other day? He 700 times his business last year.
That's not bad.
No, it's okay.
That's okay. It's decent.
And now he's like, again, the shiny object. He's sending me messages. Let's start another business. And I'm like, he's like, I have nothing to do anymore. He's like, we've completely scaled the team. Everything's running really well. We're growing, and I don't have to do anything. Let's start another business. And that's because he is like a true entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Like, he's like, okay, we did it. Now let's do something else, because he's fallen in love with the building.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love
Yeah.
that. Um, so for anyone listening who wants to like check out what you're doing or
Hmm.
learn more about it, what's the best way for them to do that?
I would say join my Facebook group. There's a million hours of free trainings in there, and all the things. It is facebook.com/groups/ the listings lab.
The listings lab. We'll put that in the show notes here.
Cool.
Cool.
Yeah, that's probably the best place. It's every single person in that group is an agent, is like a licensed practicing realtor.
I love it.
And yeah, there's just tons and tons of value.
Cool. I love that that you have that in there. That's basically my rule too in my group. Like, no spam, nothing. Like
Yeah.
you actually got to be doing something and be in real estate.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I don't have time for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, cool. So we can check it out there. So we'll put that link in the show notes.
Okay.
Let me ask you this as we start to wrap up. What are some of the things? Obviously, you're passionate about helping agents and either kind of growing their business and or scaling the business.
Mhm.
Like, what are the other things that you really enjoy doing right now, whether it's business wise or other?
So COVID has made me very aware of my need to travel. I haven't been anywhere since February of last year.
Ouch.
I'm literally like itching. I've been like watching Caribbean Life every day on HGTV, like living vicariously through other people.
You're ready to go.
I'm ready to go. But I think that there's an element of just growth and learning, whether it's learning about new cultures, whether it's traveling. I love to read. Um, yeah. I mean, my husband's also like, I'm obsessed with him.
That's
Like,
good.
I'm like totally obsessed with him. He's like the best thing in the world. So, basically anything that I can do with him that's fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that. So, um, what I have one more question for you that's kind of like specific, but before I get to that,
Yeah.
what should we like what should we talk about? Like what should I have asked you? What haven't we touched
Hmm.
on that I haven't asked you yet?
Um, I mean, there's so much, but we could have probably talked for like 5 hours.
We could probably I honestly could probably do about 4 or 5 more shows for sure.
I'm in. But I would say like we could have talked a little bit about the psychology of stranger to client.
Love that.
Um and so there's definitely some of that. The other thing that I think a lot of people from a marketing standpoint are really concerned about right now are the Apple turn off my tracking
Yeah.
stuff, which, I mean, depending on how you're building audiences, doesn't matter. It's fine.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it's just an element of, are you using the tools that you have in front of you properly? And it's the media's job is to get us all riled up about things and to get us, in fear and emotionally reacting to things. And the number of people that I've had reach out to me like losing their minds about this new thing, and I'm like, well, if you're using what we teach, it doesn't make a
Doesn't matter.
difference.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Doesn't
matter.
even matter.
No.
It's so funny. It kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier. Like, forget about like what you're doing. If you have the principles down, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like the how, or like my mentor's book, the how to of it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's not the how to that matters. It's never the how to that matters. It's
Well,
about
Abraham
what's
Hicks
driving
talks
it.
about that too, right? That element of like, it doesn't matter. Like, it's not about the tactic. It's
Yep.
not about like, if you really understand those principles, you understand. And for me, like the thing that has absolutely driven my business and my clients' businesses forward is fully and truly understanding human psychology,
Yeah.
right? When you nail that, it doesn't matter what the little details are. People think, oh, I need to build a funnel. And they think that a funnel is a series of opt-ins. But a funnel is a psychological journey from stranger to client. The little details can be built out a million different ways.
Yeah. It's so funny. Like there's so much of it is cycle. And by the way, whether you like that's true, whether we're talking about what you just said, stranger to client, or just looking inward and trying to get better as
Totally.
ourselves. That's
Yeah.
100% psychological too.
Yeah.
I agree. So learning psychology as I've learned more about copy and more about personal development and stuff over the years. One of my very best friends is a is a master at psychology and NLP and
Mm,
whatnot. And so like that's been definitely an interest of mine for so many things. Like when you really learn what gets people to move meaning make a decision, move in a direction towards something or away from something. When you really understand that, it really helps to be able to get them to, doesn't matter what you're doing, whether you're
yeah.
selling real estate, whether you're recruiting, you're selling a widget, whether you're trying to get yourself to start doing something or stop doing something or adopt something yourself. Like when you understand that at a deep level, you're golden.
And it doesn't have to be manipulative,
Not at
right?
all. In fact, it can be the most caring thing in the world.
Exactly. If you're
Some,
providing a service that can help
yes.
someone,
Yeah.
then what you're doing is you're moving them towards you is actually in their benefit.
Yeah. Now, manipulative people can also know that skill and use it
Yes.
for not good. Those are called
Mhm,
cults. And we see, like, don't get me wrong, like that happens. And there's people that do bad things. And you can also use the exact same skill
mhm,
for the most beautiful, amazing things that
mhm.
move people forward in their lives ever. It's like this, gosh, I posted this not too long ago. Not too long ago, a guy named Naval Ravikant shared it. The nature, there's a saying, the nature of the rain is the same, but it makes thorns grow in the marshes and flowers in the gardens. There was a gentleman that's actually Anthony Diamello who wrote a book called Awareness. That was which is basically based off of a long speech he gave. The nature of the rain is the same, but it makes thorns grow in the marshes and flowers in in the gardens. And like that's true. Something could be used for good or it could be used for bad. So
Always.
yeah. So cool. I'm really glad we got the chance to spend this time together. My last question for you is going to be simply what is, if you could just one message to use a Tim Ferriss question, like if you had a billboard that I'm going to just say it for this standpoint, only real estate agents saw it.
Mm.
But all real estate agents were going to see this billboard. They're going to drive by it every day. What's that message that you wish that they would all get, that we would all like learn more of or see more often, be reminded of more often?
What got you here won't get you there.
So good. Yeah, I love that. Jess, thank you for spending some time with me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Maybe we'll come back and we could probably, like you said, we could probably do this for another 4 or 5 hours. Maybe we could dive into some marketing and some other things on another
Love to.
episode in the future. But on behalf of myself and Fred and our listeners, just want to say thanks for hanging out with us today, and I'm looking forward to connecting again soon.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. All right, guys, we'll see you next week.